Daniel Grayson was a man everyone in the neighborhood admired. He was the kind of person who would rush into burning buildings without thinking twice. His uniform always carried the scent of smoke, a silent reminder of the lives he had saved. People would greet him with smiles, calling him a hero to the outside world. He was a loving husband and a dedicated firefighter. But behind closed doors, Daniel's life was far from perfect. His wife, Emily, had been by his side for over 10 years. They shared a modest house in the quiet suburbs where life seemed peaceful. Emily was the heart of the family, always taking care of the little things that made their house feel like home. Her gentle smile and warm nature made everyone feel welcome. But as the years passed, something had shifted between them. The spark that once brought them together had faded. Their conversations grew shorter, and the laughter that used to fill their evenings slowly disappeared. Emily's younger sister, Sarah, often visited their home. She was vibrant, full of life, and always had a way of lighting up the room. Sarah was different from Emily, more outgoing, more confident. She had recently gone through a breakup, and Emily invited her to stay over some weekends to help her feel less lonely. It was supposed to be a kind gesture, family helping family. But no one could have imagined the storm it would set in motion. At first, everything seemed innocent. Sarah would join them for dinner, cracking jokes and bringing laughter back into the house. Daniel enjoyed her company. She listened to his stories about work, something Emily had stopped doing a long time ago. Sarah made him feel noticed again, something he hadn't felt in years. It started with harmless conversations, little moments where their eyes would meet across the table. Neither of them thought much of it at first, but as the weeks passed, those glances lingered a little too long. The conversations grew more personal. Late at night, when Emily went to bed early, Daniel and Sarah would sit on the porch, talking for hours. They confided in each other. Sarah about her failed relationships, Daniel about the emptiness he felt in his marriage. The lines between family and temptation began to blur. One evening, after a few glasses of wine, something changed. A simple touch on the arm, a lingering gaze. It was subtle, but both of them felt it. They didn't speak about it, but the tension between them was undeniable. What started as an unspoken connection soon became something neither of them could resist. The affair began quietly. Secret messages exchanged when Emily wasn't looking, stolen moments whenever they could find them. Every touch, every whispered word made them crave each other more. They both knew it was wrong, but the thrill of secrecy only fueled their desire. What they didn't realize was how quickly their actions would spiral out of control. Daniel started finding excuses to stay home from work more often, claiming he needed rest from his demanding job. Sarah's visits became more frequent, always finding reasons to be around. Emily never suspected a thing. She trusted both of them completely. The betrayal was happening right under her nose, in the very home she had built with love. As the affair continued, the guilt began to eat away at Daniel. He loved Emily, or at least he thought he did. But every time he tried to pull away, Sarah would draw him back in. There was something intoxicating about the danger, the secrecy, the way Sarah made him feel alive again. He convinced himself that no one would ever find out, that they could keep their secret buried forever. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and what started as a forbidden desire would soon ignite a chain of events that no one could stop. The affair between Daniel and Sarah grew stronger with each passing day. What started as stolen glances had now turned into something neither of them could control. They were playing a dangerous game, but the thrill of secrecy made it impossible to stop. Every moment they spent together felt like a drug, something they both craved despite knowing the risks. Daniel found himself thinking about Sarah even when she wasn't around. Her scent lingered in the house long after she had left, and every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was her. The messages between them became more frequent. Small flirty texts at first, then turning into long conversations late at night when Emily was fast asleep. Each message pulled them closer, creating a world of their own where no one else existed. Sarah knew what they were doing was wrong, but she couldn't deny the way Daniel made her feel. He made her feel wanted, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Her recent breakup had left her heartbroken, and Daniel's attention became her escape. He listened to her, made her laugh, and gave her the comfort she had been longing for. But deep down, a small voice in her mind warned her that this wouldn't end well. The stolen moments became more reckless. They would find excuses to be alone, quick trips to the store, late-night walks around the neighborhood, even lingering hugs when Emily left the room. The boundaries between them faded with every passing day. The fear of getting caught only heightened the desire between them. They convinced themselves that no one would ever notice, that they were careful. But the truth was, the danger was half the excitement. Daniel began to lose himself in the affair. He would replay every touch, every kiss, every whispered promise in his mind over and over again. The guilt would creep in late at night. But by morning, the hunger for Sarah always won. He started avoiding Emily more and more, making up excuses to leave the house or staying out late. Emily noticed the distance, but blamed it on his demanding job. She had no reason to suspect her own sister could be the reason for his coldness. Sarah, on the other hand, began feeling the weight of the betrayal. Every time she sat across from her sister at the dinner table, the guilt gnawed at her. Emily would talk about how lucky she was to have a husband like Daniel, how he was the rock of the family. Sarah would force a smile, all the while hiding the truth that would shatter Emily's world. But no matter how hard she tried to resist, she always found herself drawn back to Daniel. The more they tried to keep their affair secret, the more dangerous it became. They would sneak off during family gatherings, locking eyes across crowded rooms, sharing fleeting touches when no one was watching. The tension between them became almost unbearable. Every time they were alone, it felt like they were crossing another line, one they could never come back from. Daniel's obsession with Sarah grew deeper. He would watch her when she wasn't looking, memorizing every move she made. Her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Every little detail became something he couldn't get out of his mind. What started as a spark had now turned into an addiction. He needed her in a way that scared him. The more she tried to pull away, the harder he held on. Sarah began to feel trapped. What once felt exciting now carried a heavy weight. She could see the darkness growing in Daniel's eyes, the possessiveness, the desperation. He would text her constantly, wanting to know where she was, who she was with. At first, she thought it was sweet, a sign that he cared. But soon it became suffocating. Daniel's love started to feel more like control. Whenever Sarah tried to distance herself, Daniel would find a way to pull her back. He would show up unexpectedly, reminding her of the passion they shared, making promises that things would be different. But the more he clung to her, the more she began to fear him. She wanted out, but every time she tried to break away, something in Daniel's eyes warned her that letting go wouldn't be so easy. The secret they shared had already begun to poison everything around them. What started as an affair was quickly spiraling into something far more dangerous. And neither of them realized they had already crossed the point of no return. It was only a matter of time before the truth began to surface. Secrets like theirs never stayed buried for long. The stolen glances, the sudden silences whenever Emily entered the room, the little details that once seemed harmless now carried a weight too heavy to hide. Emily started noticing the changes, even if she didn't want to admit them at first. Daniel had become distant, more distracted than ever. His once warm touches had grown cold, and the playful conversations they used to share had faded into short, forced exchanges. At first, Emily tried to push away the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. She told herself it was just the stress from Daniel's job, the long nights, the pressure of saving lives. But deep down, a different kind of fear was starting to take root. She could feel something was off, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The house that had once been filled with laughter now felt heavier, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Sarah noticed the shift too. The guilt was eating her alive. Every time Emily hugged her or told her how grateful she was to have her sister around, it felt like a knife twisting deeper into her chest. Sarah had always looked up to Emily, the older sister who had been her protector, her best friend. But now, she was betraying the one person who had always stood by her side. The weight of the secret pressed down on her more each day, but she couldn't find the courage to end it. Every time she tried to pull away from Daniel, he would find a way to reel her back in. Daniel's obsession had only grown stronger. What started as a passionate affair was now something darker. He had become possessive, always needing to know where Sarah was and who she was talking to. The rush of sneaking around had turned into a dangerous addiction. He couldn't imagine losing her, even if it meant destroying everything around him. Emily's suspicions grew with every passing day. The late-night texts Daniel tried to hide, the whispered conversations between him and Sarah. Little pieces of the puzzle slowly began falling into place. She noticed how Daniel's eyes lingered on Sarah a little too long, how Sarah avoided looking at her whenever she asked simple questions. The warmth between them had been replaced by something colder, something neither of them could hide anymore. One evening, Emily's heart raced as she scrolled through Daniel's phone while he was in the shower. Her hands trembled as she opened his messages. What she found shattered her world in an instant. The messages were there, hidden under fake names and carefully deleted conversations. But the truth always leaves traces behind. The way he spoke to Sarah, the promises he made, it was all there in black and white. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her worst fear had been staring her in the face all along. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had ever imagined. She felt her chest tighten, the walls of the room closing in around her. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The sister she had trusted with everything had been lying to her. The husband she had built her life with had broken every vow he ever made. When Daniel stepped out of the shower, he found Emily sitting at the edge of the bed, his phone clutched tightly in her hands. The silence in the room was suffocating. He froze in place, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't need to ask what she had seen. The look in her eyes said it all. "What is this, Daniel?" Emily's voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with pain. Daniel's mind raced, searching for the right lie, the perfect excuse. But there was none. The truth was staring them both in the face, and there was no way to bury it now. He stammered, trying to find the words, but Emily's shattered gaze pierced through him. Sarah walked into the room at that moment, her face paling as she saw the phone in Emily's hand. The air grew heavy, thick with tension. No one spoke. The three of them were trapped in that suffocating silence, a silence that held every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment between Daniel and Sarah. Emily's hands shook as she stood up, her eyes flicking between them. The pain in her voice cut through the room like a knife. "How could you?" Neither of them had an answer. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but no apology would ever be enough. The weight of what they had done came crashing down all at once. From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The trust that had held their family together was shattered. The house that had once felt warm and safe now felt like a prison, every wall echoing with the betrayal that had torn them apart. But what none of them knew was that this was only the beginning. The storm they had set in motion was far from over. What started as a forbidden affair would soon spiral into something far more dangerous, something none of them could stop. The days following the discovery were filled with unbearable silence. Emily barely spoke, her eyes hollow and distant. The woman who once filled the house with warmth now moved like a ghost, carrying the weight of betrayal on her shoulders. Sarah avoided staying over, making excuses to keep her distance. But even from afar, the guilt clung to her like a shadow. The once close bond between the sisters had been shattered into something unrecognizable. Daniel tried to patch the cracks, but every attempt only made them deeper. He would leave flowers on the kitchen table or mumble empty apologies. But Emily's cold stare told him those gestures meant nothing now. The man who had once been her protector had become a stranger. At night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, a growing wall of silence between them. But while Emily's pain turned inward, Daniel's obsession grew darker. The affair might have been exposed, but his desire for Sarah hadn't faded. If anything, it had only intensified. Losing her was something he couldn't accept. His mind spiraled with thoughts of her, where she was, who she was with, whether she was thinking of him. Every unanswered message, every missed call gnawed at him. He would replay their stolen moments in his head, convincing himself that she still wanted him, even if she was trying to pull away. Sarah had stopped replying to his messages, blocking his number to create distance. But Daniel wasn't the type of man to let go easily. He started showing up at her apartment unannounced, waiting in his car for hours just to catch a glimpse of her. At first, She thought it was just his way of trying to fix things, an apology for everything they had done. But the way his eyes lingered on her made her stomach twist. There was something possessive in his gaze, something she hadn't noticed before. One night, Sarah heard footsteps outside her window. Her heart pounded in her chest as she peeked through the blinds, only to see Daniel standing beneath the flickering streetlight. His face was hidden in shadows, but she could feel his eyes locked on her. She froze, unsure whether to call the police or confront him. When she finally opened the door, he was gone, leaving nothing behind but the faint echo of his presence. The next day, a bouquet of roses appeared on her doorstep. No note, no name, but Sarah didn't need one to know who they were from. She tried to convince herself that Daniel was just struggling, that he would eventually let go. But deep down, fear had already started to bloom inside her. She began changing her routine, avoiding the places they used to meet. She told herself she was imagining things, that she was overreacting. But the feeling of being watched never went away. Daniel's obsession consumed him. He would sit in his car late at night, scrolling through old messages, staring at pictures of Sarah on his phone. The lines between love and possession blurred in his mind. He convinced himself that she belonged to him, that she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Emily noticed a shift in him. His once quiet guilt had morphed into something far more unsettling. He would disappear for hours without explanation, coming home with bloodshot eyes and the stench of cigarettes clinging to his clothes. The man who had once been her protector was unraveling before her eyes. Sarah finally broke the silence one evening, sending Daniel a final message. "This is to stop. Whatever we had is over. Please leave me alone." Daniel stared at the screen for what felt like hours, his heart hammering in his chest. His fingers trembled as he typed out reply after reply, only to delete each one. His mind raced, swinging between heartbreak and rage. How could she walk away from him after everything they'd shared? How could she throw him away like he meant nothing? He couldn't let her go. The next few nights, Sarah felt the presence outside her window again. The faint sound of footsteps in the dark, the feeling of eyes watching her from the shadows. She started locking every door, double-checking the windows before bed. But no matter how hard she tried to push the fear away, it was always there, lingering just beneath the surface. One night, she woke up to find her front door slightly open, the chain lock dangling loose. Her heart pounded in her chest as she searched the apartment, but no one was there. Nothing was missing. Not her wallet, not her keys, but the sense of violation made her skin crawl. She called Emily the next morning, her voice shaking. "I think Daniel's following me." For a long moment, there was only silence on the other end of the line. Emily's voice was cold when she finally spoke. "I don't know what you expect me to do about it." The pain in her sister's voice was sharper than any knife. Sarah wanted to beg for forgiveness, to explain that she never meant for any of this to happen. But there was no turning back now. The bond they once shared was broken beyond repair. Daniel's obsession had become something dangerous, something neither of them could control. What had started as passion had twisted into possession. And now, Sarah was beginning to realize that the man she thought she knew was capable of far more than she ever imagined. Sarah's fear grew stronger with each passing day. The feeling of being watched never left her, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. The shadows outside her apartment seemed darker, the silence at night heavier. She double-checked every lock before bed, but sleep rarely came. Her heart would race at the sound of footsteps in the hallway, always expecting to see Daniel's face on the other side of the door. Her phone buzzed constantly, unknown numbers, missed calls, and messages from hidden accounts. Every time she opened her inbox, the same chilling words appeared. "You can't just walk away from me. I know you're thinking about me. You belong to me, Sarah." No name, no proof, but she knew exactly who was behind them. Blocking the numbers didn't help. New ones would appear within hours. The man who once whispered promises in her ear was now hunting her from the shadows. What scared her the most was how easily he had slipped into this darker version of himself, as if the man she thought she knew had been hiding underneath all along. Sarah went to police, but without concrete proof, they couldn't do much. Daniel had never directly threatened her. There were no bruises, no physical harm, just fear that followed her everywhere she went. The officers told her to be careful, to document everything, but deep down, Sarah knew the system couldn't protect her from someone like Daniel. Emily refused to speak to her anymore. Every time Sarah called, the line would go straight to voicemail. She couldn't blame her sister, not after what she'd done, but the loneliness made everything worse. The one person who could have understood her pain had turned her back. Now, Sarah was completely alone. Daniel's obsession was spiraling out of control. He spent his nights parked outside Sarah's apartment, watching the lights flicker on and off. His mind twisted every glimpse of her into a sign that she still wanted him, that she was just playing hard to get. He convinced himself that if he could just talk to her one more time, she would come back to him. He started breaking into her apartment when she wasn't home. Small things at first, moving a picture frame, leaving a cigarette butt on the windowsill. He wanted her to know he had been there, without ever revealing himself. It was his way of reminding her that she could never truly escape him. The fear in her eyes when she noticed these little changes only fueled his obsession. But Sarah was smarter than he gave her credit for. She had started keeping a journal, writing down every strange noise, every message, every time she felt him near. She installed cameras in her apartment, small ones hidden in vents and smoke detectors. If Daniel was going to play games, she would catch him in the act. One night, Sarah's worst fear came true. It was just past midnight when she heard the soft creak of the front door. Her heart pounded as she reached for her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. She pressed the phone to her ear, barely breathing as the operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? Before she could speak, the line went dead. Her heart froze. The power had gone out, the cameras, the locks, everything. Her apartment was cloaked in complete darkness. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. Sarah, the voice was low, almost tender, the same voice that once whispered promises in the dead of night. She stumbled back, pressing herself against the wall, her breath coming in shallow gasps. You think you can just leave me? Her eyes darted toward the kitchen where she kept a knife hidden in the drawer. But the footsteps were getting closer. Too close. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk. The scent of cigarette smoke filled the air, sending chills down her spine. He was inside. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she clutched the knife, her hands shaking. Please, just leave me alone. A low chuckle echoed through the apartment. You were never alone, Sarah. You just didn't know I was always watching. The darkness swallowed his figure, leaving only the sound of his breathing. In that moment, Sarah realized a man standing in the shadows wasn't the Daniel she had once fallen for. He was something far more dangerous, something she had helped create. The police arrived minutes later, but by then, Daniel was gone, vanishing into the night like a ghost. The only trace of him left behind was a single cigarette, but still smoldering on the windowsill. Sarah's cameras had captured everything. The way he moved through her apartment, the chilling whispers, the moment he stood inches away from her without ever touching her. It was enough to finally issue a restraining order, but not enough to stop him. Daniel's obsession was far from over. He had tasted control, and now he couldn't let go. Sarah moved to a new apartment across town, but the messages kept coming, always from different numbers, always the same haunting words. You can't hide from me. The fear became her constant companion, lurking in every shadow, every locked door, every flickering streetlight. What started as forbidden affair had spiraled into something no one could have ever imagined. A dangerous game where the price of desire was paid in fear. Some secrets are buried deep, but others refuse to stay hidden. And the scariest part? Daniel was still out there, still watching, still waiting. If you want to know how this chilling story ends, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support helps us bring you more real-life crime stories that will leave you questioning just how well you really know the people around you. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.